Welcome back to the Hoopball YouTube channel. We are in the home stretch, everyone. The NBA season, as of the time that I'm recording this video, is less than 2 weeks away. I'm sure plenty of you are subscribed to this channel, or this is your first time here. You're all kind of coming to grips with that and now trying to beef up on all of your fantasy basketball knowledge so you can field that team to beat your friends, to beat your coworkers, to beat that random group of whoever. Get all that bragging rights, all that money. You know what the deal is. So this is the time of year where everyone really starts ramping up and really wants to know, just get to the nitty gritty here, all the important stuff you want to know. So today I thought I'd have fun and do a video about everyone's favorite topic, draft steals and draft busts. We are going to take a look at a Yahoo 9-category league draft. This is all information that I'm going to base off of Yahoo's current draft board. 16 players. We're going to go 8 rounds deep. Each round, 1 steal, 1 bust. I'm defining round here by every 12 picks based off of Yahoo's X rank, which is the rankings that you all see when you enter a draft room, just that order of guys. So every 12 picks will be 1 round. We are specifically looking to find fantasy value. When I identify someone as a steal or a bust, I'm not making a statement about how good I think they are or what kind of season they're going to have. At least, I guess to some degree I am, but it's more about finding value. You want to be able to draft guys at the best possible spot to turn out fantasy value. There are some guys that might be going too high that you could push and wait on and maybe grab around later, get another valuable guy and really raise your ceiling. It's just all about value hunting. And I want to emphasize that when I say that someone's a bust, I'm not saying that they suck. And I know I'm going to get some comments one way or another saying that I think some guys suck, even though I decided to put this friendly disclaimer at the beginning of the video. But you know what? I like that. Drop a comment on this video. This is a topic that's rife for debate. Tell me what you think about these guys, whether or not you agree with me that they are a steal or a bust. I'd love to, I'll chat with y'all in the comments. We can go back and forth, share some ideas. And of course, if this is your first time visiting the Hoopball YouTube channel, please drop a like on this video and subscribe. It would mean a lot. And you know what? Let's just get right into it. And again, this is for 9-category leagues, not points leagues. Not points leagues. 9-cat. All right. So we're going to start with round 1. And round 1's kind of a tricky area to identify steals, because everyone that you're drafting with your first overall pick, you're not really stealing them. They should be really good. But this guy that I'm going to talk about, I feel like is a little bit better than people are giving him credit for. And for some of y'all who are picking this position, you might have an opportunity to coop some value. And I'm talking about James Harden of the Brooklyn Nets. I think that James Harden, as you can see up in the corner there, his current X rank on Yahoo is 4. He has an ADP of 5.6. So a lot of the times there's, Harden's usually going, maybe sometimes at 4, but 5 and 6 too. The more I've been thinking about it and digging into things here, I think that James Harden is going to be a top 3 player in 9-cat leagues this year. I think that he is right. I'm at the point in my draft board where I have him firmly behind Nikola Jokic and Steph Curry for those 9-category spots. Take a look at his stat line here, first of all, with the Brooklyn Nets, since he joined them from January 16th last season through the end of the year. Pretty beautiful stuff, right? He was a top 3 player in 9-category leagues with this stat line. Of course, that comes with a lot of missed games from Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Harden himself had a hamstring issue that took him out of commission. I think this is about a 35-game sample size. But he was still a top 3 player in 9-cat leagues with it. But that's not necessarily the reason that I have him as a higher than others right now, or think that he is a safer bet for top 3 production. Because I think that this stat line, one of the first things that jumps out to me is how high that assist count is compared to the points. I think that when Harden got to Brooklyn, which we all remember was in a relatively, we all know how that went down. It was not on friendly terms with the Rockets. He did a lot to get himself out of Houston, both on and off the court. And when he got to Brooklyn, the impression that most walked away with was that his goal was to fit in. He wanted to get rid of those dispersions that were out there about him being a bad teammate. He really just wanted to find ways to get other guys involved and not mess up what Kyrie and KD were trying to build. So we saw him be taking a lot more of a step back offensively, less shot volume, and more of a guy who aimed to fit in. It speaks to the level of leadership that he seeks to have on this team. And then from everything that I'm reading in training camp, James Harden is debatably the leader of the locker room. I think that there's another element that I think he was out of shape. I mean, and I don't think it. I kind of know that he was out of shape. There was plenty of memes about it. Harden himself has talked about this in training camp press conferences. Harden talked about how he knew that he wasn't physically right when he got to Brooklyn. He didn't outright say that he gained a lot of weight to get out of Houston, but he alluded to the fact that he wasn't in peak physical condition to give him everything that he got, and that he made a commitment this offseason to get back to that degree. And I'm not one to, we always see the workout videos over the offseason and just like, oh man, you see this guy in an open gym crossing up this defender you never heard of, or like, look at what he's benching over there. I'm not trying to make too much of that. But Harden legitimately looks like he lost a lot of weight. He looks like he's back in that Houston shape that he was in before. I think that a year of familiarity with these guys and a more defined role in the locker room, I think he's going to be more comfortable being similar to Houston James Harden. I think we're going to see the shot attempts go back from maybe 16.6 to maybe 18.5. He's probably going to average a lot of assists still, maybe not as much as 10.9, but for all intents and purposes, he's the best playmaker on this team. And I haven't brought this part up yet because as of recording this video, it's still in flux. We don't really know what's going to happen with Kyrie Irving. We don't know if this is, his current standoff with the, local mandates of vaccination to play home games in Brooklyn. He's still unvaccinated. He's still away from the team. It's either he's going to play half of these games for Brooklyn this year or not at all. It's still unclear. I think that Harden could be a top 3 player, even if Kyrie is going to be with the team for the most part of the season. But if Kyrie's not with the team at all this season, that directly benefits James Harden. I think he's going to be durable. I think he's going to be more comfortable. And there is that extra element that he could have a lot of usage coming his way if Kyrie's not involved. So he is if I have a number 3 pick in a draft, he's the guy I'm going for. I think that he is currently being overlooked. One of the guys he's being overlooked for is my first round bust, and that is Luka Doncic, who has an X rank right ahead of Harden at 3 and an ADP of 3.2. Most drafts, you'll see Luka going within those first 3 picks. I've seen him go with the 2nd overall pick. I've even seen him go with the 1st overall pick. And I've seen fantasy experts making that distinction 1, 2, and 3. So I get the hype. All right. I understand that this man right here is probably going to be the MVP of the league multi-time very soon. He is as exciting a young prospect as we have in all of basketball, and we've seen him a long time. But in fantasy basketball, specifically 9 category leagues, Luka has not gotten to a top 10 season yet. It just hasn't happened. You can see right there. He's at highest he's ever finished was top 25. Last year, it was, I believe he was outside the top 35 in a 9 category league. And that has a lot to do with his really high turnovers, his pretty poor percentages across the board. And he's not the greatest defensive stat guy either. I mean, he's not terrible there. It's really just percentages and turnovers that knock him down the board, which means that if you're punting, there's plenty of avenues to justify Luka as a first round pick, as a top 5 pick, what have you. I am not saying that that's necessarily wrong. I just don't think that you should be taking him in the top 3 picks. I think that Jokic and Curry are unquestionably the 1-2 in my opinion. And as you've just heard my spiel, I think James Harden's ahead of him too. In a 9-cat league, I think you can maybe even make arguments for Karl Anthony Towns. If you think that Kevin Durant or Anthony Davis turn in mostly healthy years, you could argue that those 2 finish ahead of Luka. Giannis, who has his flaws as well. I mean, horrible free throw percent shooter, high turnovers, low threes. He's going ahead of Luka too. And he's still someone that debatably could finish the year higher in a 9-category league than he will. One of these years, we're going to get it wrong. And by we, I'm talking about fantasy analysts at large who make this point about Luka. He's going to be a top 5 player at some point. I'm just skeptical that it's going to happen this year. And even if it does, you're doing yourself no favors taking him with the top 3 pick. I just think that there's better value on the board. So he's the guy that I would avoid in that range. If he falls to 7 or 8, go for it. But yeah, I'm not doing it at 3 or 2. Let's move on to the second round. We're going to talk about a guy here who has a considerable amount of hype for good reason heading into the year, and that's Freddie VanVleet, the new starting point guard for the Toronto Raptors. And he's been a point guard, played plenty of point guard for them, but he's played a lot of off-ball of Kyle Lowry in the past. Now he's got the reins. He's going to see a usage bump this season, which comes with both pitfalls and pluses for fantasy value for a guy like him. But the real reason I have him as a steal, and you can see that his X rank is 22, ADP of 24.2, and I think that ADP has been rising as well. He's probably going a little earlier than that in a lot of Yahoo drafts. But I just feel that, and the other element to take note of here is that he was a top 15 player in 9 category leagues last year. I think that the bumps that he's going to see in points, likely going to see, he's probably going to average over 20 a game this season. I think that he's probably going to go from about 6.5 assists to maybe closer to 7.5 this year as the lead guard. I just, there's a lot to be made about what those. I think a lot of the questions that people are asking with Freddie VanVleet is, he's going to be in this role, but is the starting featured point guard sort of an outsized one for him? Like, what's this going to be for his turnovers? Are those going to get really, really high as the lead guard? His field goal percentage is already terrible. If he's going to take more shots, won't that hurt you in that category more? I think both of those are valid. There's an argument to be had that the trade-off in more points and more assists, it could be a net positive, a slight net negative, or a net neutral when you factor in the worse field goal percentage, or at least the higher volume of bad field goal percentage and higher turnover marks. It could just be a wash. If it's just a wash, in terms of fantasy value, I think if you're getting him at 22, you're still have a pretty good bet of getting some. He was already top 15 last season. I think people might be overthinking it by putting him too low. I don't know if that made sense, but my rationale for why he's this low and why people continue to take him this low is because they don't see him as a star. They just don't see that name and see him as a star. And there might be expectations that the role is too large and there will be some statistical drawbacks because of that. I don't see it that way. I think that it's just a good rule of thumb in a lot of fantasy drafts is if you know a guy finished at a rank that's higher than where he's currently getting drafted this year, and you can't really think of a good reason why, which is we're going to see a lot of those in this video, just take it. It's a steal. I think this is a steal here. I fail to see how Freddie VanVleet isn't inside the top 20 players in fantasy basketball in 9-cat leagues this year. So you can get him at 25, like that ADP suggests. It's a good bet. This next guy that I'm going to talk about, the bust in round 2, might be the most confident I'll be about any player in this video, and that is new Laker addition Russell Westbrook. He is currently got an X rank of 19. He has an ADP of 21.1, and that is an evaluation by Yahoo that I think is very, very much driven by points leagues. And this is an important a distinction to make, and kind of where you see all these discrepancies in value. Yahoo's board is an aggregate of both category league rankings and points leagues rankings, and those have wildly different effects on different players. It's what creates most of the fantasy value in both settings is that combination of the same rank board being used for 2 formats. Westbrook is a fantastic points league player. He is a first-round points league player most years and could be again this year, and that's why he's this high. But take a look, and you can read what I have right here. The last time that Russell Westbrook was a top 20 player in 9-cat was the 2016-2017 season, the year he won MVP. He's currently 32, the third option in Los Angeles, playing with a guy in LeBron James who does more of the things that he does than perhaps any player he has ever played with. I don't think that's an exaggeration. LeBron is point guard. Russell is a point guard. These guys are going to take from each other. There is just zero scenario that Russell Westbrook is a good decision to draft at this spot. And a lot of people in your category leagues are going to do it just because he's that high on the board. He's a recognizable name. People are probably wise to assume that he's going to take some steps back, but he's probably someone that people will take in the 3rd round if he falls far enough. And that's a mistake too. I wouldn't take him in the 3rd round. I wouldn't take him in the 4th round. I don't even know if I might take him in the 5th round, but I don't even know if I'd do it there. There's just, yeah, he's going to get you a lot of points and rebounds and assists, but his percentages are terrible. The turnovers are bad. He doesn't get enough threes. The defensive stats they're getting worse. To get to anywhere close to this, he would need LeBron or AD to miss a considerable amount of time. And even then, I don't think that he has enough at this stage of his career to be a top 29 category league player. So this is a stay away at all costs. If you are in a 9-cat league, don't even think about it. It's going to freak you out seeing him that high and seeing that number 19 next to his name when you're picking in the 40s. You're like, oh man, can I really pass this guy again? You should probably do that. You should do that. Don't take him. Don't take him in the 2nd round, certainly. It's going to be an interesting year for him for sure. And again, I'm a huge Russell Westbrook fan, and I'm fascinated to see how he operates as a member of this Lakers squad. Like, is he really going to take the 3rd most amount of shots? Will he supersede Davis or LeBron in shot attempts per game? Remains to be seen. But do go ahead and watch, like I will, watch that from the outside. Don't do it through the lens of your fantasy team. Let's move on to round 3. Next guy we have here is someone that I've been really high on, and calling him a steal, considering all the hype that's around him, seems kind of crazy. But Michael Porter Jr. to me is someone in this 3rd round slot with an X rank of 31 and an ADP of 31.9. That's still a steal in 9-cat leagues this year. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I mean, and you can see I have on the screen there what his stat line was after the Jamal Murray ACL injury last year. Ignore that for a second. On the totality of the season, Michael Porter Jr. was already a top 30 fantasy player in 9-cat leagues, and that was playing next to Jamal Murray for the majority of the season. In this 17-game sample size without Murray last year, Porter jumped his scoring marks, his shot attempts, his field goal percent, all went up considerably. His usage went up. He kept his turnovers really low. 1.6 is nothing for a guy who's giving you 23.5 points per game, 4 threes on 15 shots. 56% is nuts. This line that you're looking at right here is closer to an early 2nd round player in 9-cat leagues than an early 3rd round player. And that's a big difference. That is a large jump. I think that his ceiling in this year should be considered as a high 2nd round player. Yeah, there's injury risks. Yeah, there's risks that he's unvaccinated and could be subject to stricter, protocols depending on the city that he's in or the exposure he may have. I can't answer you on that, but I can tell you just as how this Nuggets team is going to be constructed, he is going to lead the team in scoring this year. I think that he will lead the team. I think he'll score more than Jokic. I don't think that's a crazy thought. I think that he is going to be one of the most efficient players in the NBA. I think that he could still grow in the boards and blocks department too. I'm fascinated to see what he can do. But getting him if you were able to pick him at 30, you already would have been getting a safe bet based off of what he did last year as the secondary to tertiary offensive option. This year, it's going to be different, and I am really, really high on him. So I guess the hype's going to keep going. He's probably going earlier than 31, as this ADP suggests. He's been rocketing up draft boards for a while now. But if you can get him with your 3rd round pick, I think you're doing pretty well, regardless of what your build is in 9-cat leagues. Let's go to a 3rd round bust. And there's a good amount of options to choose from here. I was debating talking about LeBron, but we just did Westbrook in sort of a similar conversation. Let's just talk about Zion, who obviously is a very recognizable name. Everybody loves Zion. I love Zion. He's a fascinating guy to watch play. And beyond that, he's definitely someone who is going to be a top 10 fantasy player one day in category leagues too. I mean, he put up second half of his season was like Shaq level dominance in the paint. One of the greatest field goal percentage guys in fantasy basketball, high scoring marks. The issue though is that there's just not enough other stuff around his game to get him to a top 30 valuation. He's never been inside the top 60 in 9 category leagues. And granted, that's been 2 seasons. So it's not like we're working with the largest breadth of data. We would assume that he's going to continue to improve. But for Zion to get to this point, he's going to need to take a considerable step up, either as an outside shooter, as a playmaker, which are both feasible. Maybe see more in the defensive stat category. Like I have no doubt that there's room for growth, but he's not only is he far away from this valuation, but I can't get past this weird foot injury that went unreported by the Pelicans. This fractured foot that Zion suffered in the offseason that he is still recovering from and may not be ready for the start of the regular season. For a guy who relies on explosiveness and just force of nature from the lower half of his body, to have a foot injury and not be ready, not be able to go through training camp and start the regular season coming off an injury like that, I'm out. Just make it someone else's potential headache, because that is this in fantasy basketball. That is usually a recipe for headaches all season long. I'm going to, like, you rarely want to draft players who are injured heading into a season, especially for a guy like Zion, who is got a lot of hype. The hype is driving as well as points leagues. He's a better points leagues player than category leagues. That's what's driving this valuation here. I'm just not messing around with him with that foot injury news. I'd prefer to maybe grab him in the 4th round if possible. And I don't think it's going to be possible. No one's going to let him fall that far. So I think, and this is like Luke, like I talked about with Luka, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Zion is totally fine. Maybe he doesn't even miss games to start the season. Maybe David Griffin was telling us the truth and he will be out there for the start of the year. And maybe we see him add all those different facets to his game statistically that launch him into a top 20 role. It's probably going to happen at some point. I'm not arguing against that. There's just a lot of risk, and he's not there yet. And you don't want to take too many risks with your first 3 picks. So this is a pretty risky one, in my opinion. So I'd move elsewhere with that. That's that. Next guy we're going to talk about, 4th round steal, one of my favorite guys in drafts this year. I'm really hoping I can wind up with him in a lot of spots. And that's Jrue Holiday of the Milwaukee Bucks. X rank of 38 right now, an ADP of 42. He was inside the top 20 in 9-cat leagues last year. The move to Milwaukee was fantastic for his fantasy game. He's one of the most efficient guards in the league, one of the most well-rounded guards statistically in the NBA. And the only reason that I can think that he's being rated this low, I mean, over 20 spots lower than where he was in 9-cat leagues last year. He's going back into the same role in Milwaukee. We're not any point guard that's going to take minutes from him. The only argument that you can make is that, and this is a legitimate argument, is that the quick turnaround for Holiday from an NBA Finals run, a short offseason, and playing in the Olympics, you run risk of overworking this dude and maybe increase his injury risk. It's just that there's a legitimate concern with that. But I think that I just think that this particular draft valuation for Jrue Holiday takes enough of that risk into account to make it worth it. Because if he's healthy and he manages to play, even if he's out of gas towards the end of the year, maybe he gets some nights off. I'm sure it's going to happen. I anticipate a lot of these Bucks vets are going to be rested at certain points, but he's just too skilled, too versatile statistically to pass up any farther than this. I think that I've actually seen him falling a little bit more in drafts too. So it's possible that you could wind up with Jrue Holiday in the mid to late 40s. And, I see, unlike Zion, who has never proven that he can do it, Jrue has proven that he can hit this mark and more. So that's a risk I'm willing to take, especially in the 4th round. He's a very appealing target to me. It remains to be seen if that fatigue will really set in for him. It's totally in play, especially considering his age. But I don't know. This seems like it's low enough to take that gamble, because he can really help you in every area. Legitimately, there's very few guards that can do that. And now I'm going to go to busts here. And I'll be honest, the 4th round is filled with a lot of guys that I'd be very interested in drafting. It was kind of difficult to identify a real bust. But I'm going to go ahead and make one. And just to show you that I'm not an incredibly biased, as you can see the jerseys in the background, you can even see this right here, go Hawks. We're going to talk about my man, though, JC, the guy who is on this shirt right here. X rank of 45, ADP of 42.6. I'm calling him a bust only so much as that I think that drafting him at this range eliminates pretty much all avenues to fantasy value, unless the Hawks suffer a myriad of injuries that really increase his role in the offense. You can see right there on the bar there, he averaged 11 shots per game under McMillan, and that has less to do with McMillan, granted, than it does, I think, that Bogdanovich returned to the Hawks starting unit at that exact same time that McMillan took over. That is just it. To me, it just seems that there's so many guys who are going to demand shots on this team, Bogdanovich included. We still haven't seen Hunter and Bogdanovich out there at the same time, and I know that Hunter's going to command some shots in the offense this year after what he flashed his ability to create for himself. The fact of the matter is that John Collins relies on people to get him the ball in the offense, and the more guys that are in that Hawks offense making their own shots, or Trey having to choose between all these different options to hook people up, get John a lob opportunity, a spot up at a pick and pop opportunity, all that kind of stuff that he needs. It's just there's not enough shots, and that limits Collins' ability to help you in points, obviously, in threes. He's great in both percentages, but the less time that he has the ball in his hand, the less he's able to cash in on that. 42 is just a little too high for me. In this range, under about March 2nd, when he was playing under Nate McMillan and Bogdanovich was out there, John Collins was like a top 55 player in 9-cat leagues, which is still good. And if he fits a build that you're working with, it makes sense to draft him. I can justify that. But this ranking here eliminates a lot of your chance at value, unless the Hawks have particularly injuries to Clint Capella and one of Hunter and Bogey. There's just not going to be enough avenues, despite how talented I think JC is. It's going to be tough to justify getting him any higher than this. So I'd try and see if I could wait to the 5th round to take a shot at him. And at that point, I think he's definitely going to be a value to you there. But that's just my opinion on that one. The 4th round's really, really deep. There's a lot of guys I wanted to talk about, but I want to limit it to 1 steal and 1 bust per round. So we'll do another video where I break a couple more of these people down. Let's go to round 5, though, where it was kind of the opposite, where I felt that there was a lot of value in round 4. Round 5, there is a large mix of guys who might be too hyped and might be capped out in terms of value, and a lot of guys who have some name recognition but might be taking steps back. So it's a lot easier for me to find a bust. Let's talk about a steal in round 5, though, and I think I feel pretty good. This is a very light steal. I don't know how large of a steal this would be, but at his current X rank and ADP, Lonzo Ball feels like a pretty good pick in this 5th round range. You can take a look at his numbers from the Pelican season below, from last year. I just like Lonzo in Chicago. I really like offensively. I think this team is just going to fly. I've been very encouraged by just how Billy Donovan talks about Lonzo's role in here. He envisions him being a big facilitator for this team, which is noteworthy because Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, all 3 of those guys are really good playmakers. But Billy Donovan really wants to see – it seems like Donovan really wants to implement a system where Lonzo is an engine offensively. And that'll really behoove him if he can jump that 5.7 assists number to something maybe like 6.5 or 7. I think that the 12.5 shots per game that he took in New Orleans is probably going to go down, but not necessarily by that much. His floor spacing, the fact that he has become a really reliable 3-point shooter is valuable on this Bulls team, especially with Vucevic and DeMar DeRozan out there. They're going to need floor spacing, and I think that Lonzo is still going to see plenty of touches on the perimeter. He's going to keep people honest out there, but really I'm encouraged. I like what I've heard coming out of training camp for these guys about how they envision his role. And if those assist numbers go up and the rest of this stuff stays relatively consistent from last year, I mean, I think he was inside the top 50 just barely. I could see him being a top 40 player this year. So, I think that he's a pretty solid point guard to target in that 5th round if you have an opportunity to do so. There's a lot of questions about how many shots he'll wind up with and how much of this offense he actually does end up running. We don't want to get carried away with how we take training camp comments, because things can obviously change once you get out there and see how everyone fits in like real non-preseason basketball. But to me, I think Lonzo is primed to take a step up in terms of fantasy value. So I like him for this spot. The busts were pretty easy to identify, though. There's a good amount of them that are in this range here, including some guys that I was really excited to draft, like Robert Williams or an Isaiah Stewart, who are both now inside this 5th round per Yahoo's X ranks, and that's getting real dicey for me to take them there. But I'm not going to talk about either of those two centers. I'm going to talk about Ja Morant. In fact, I've already talked about Ja Morant a few times on this channel. You can check out this projecting. Where is it? Right there. Top right corner, there, over there. Projecting the top 100 players. We've covered some Memphis Grizzlies. We talked about Ja Morant in that video. I'm actually bullish on his ability to be a top 100 fantasy basketball player this year. He's yet to record one, but I think this could be the year that he does it. I have a lot of faith in his ability to improve as a player. There's there's just so many avenues that he can expand his game in, from scoring more, from expanding his range, to getting involved in defensive stats, to improving his touch from the free throw line. Like, there's a lot of room to grow. And most people probably don't even see it this way with Ja, because he's got so much name recognition. They probably are shocked. You might be shocked to see that he's never had a top 100 9-cat season, but it's true, and it's not been close. I mean, he's been outside the top 200, I think, in both. He was outside the top 200 last season. It was really bad. But I think that he can get to me in a best case scenario. I could see him being a top 80 player. As you can tell, though, the issue with that is that in order to draft Ja Morant this year, you have to be grabbing him within the first 40 picks. And I'm sorry, even if by the rosiest projection I can offer for Ja, maybe he could be a top 40 player this year, there is absolutely no way he's going higher than that with all of his current holes in his game. Not a good three-point shooter, not a good rebounder for a guard. Even by guard standards, it's pretty okay. Defensive stats are poor. The percentages are whatever. The turnovers are really high. He's really just giving you value in points and assists. So much more to go before he can get to this point. And I think it's just an easy, it's easy to just overlook this one. I mean, this is another points league type of player getting that points league bump, but also the name recognition a lot for this pick here. There's just really no way that you're getting a fantasy value at that spot. So I'm not about it. I'm not for it. Let's talk about a round 6 steal, and this is just, I'm going to be real short and sweet to the point here. Mikal Bridges at 64 with an ADP of 60.2. He was a top 45 player in 9 category leagues last season. And the thing that gets me about this valuation is that for the life of me, I cannot understand what's driving it, other than the points league aspect, which I guess is what it is. This is an easy win in 9-cat leagues. There's no way. Where is he going to take a step back? He doesn't even rely on high usage to get to this point. Bridges is great at both percentages, big steals guy, incredibly low turnovers, high 3-point, accuracy, and decent volume. Frankly, the floor is really safe. He is a safe top 50 player going forward. I think pretty much every season in 9-cat leagues. And he's just going to get better. So, yeah, this is a points league influence turning out just an incredibly, just don't even think about it value in 9-cat leagues. I'd even grab Bridges in the 5th round but it might be worth waiting to the 6th to see if you could really capitalize on potential value. I mean, this is a guy who could win you some leagues, in my opinion. So I'm very bullish on him. I'm not even going to waste any more time. I think it just says it all right there. He is 15 spots lower, or I guess higher, than he finished last year. He's a young guy in the same role, and he's only going to get better. What's not to like there? Here's something that's another young guy who might be getting too much of a bump. Another points league influence here. Collin Sexton actually ranked right behind Bridges at 65. And look, this is a really great example of how how overinflated points are in fantasy leagues, how we value them so highly. Because look at his stat line right here. Your first impressions are wow, this seems like a great spot to get him. I can get a guy who's scoring 24 points a game, a young guard he could probably average more than that this year, take another step forward. What's not to love here? Well, he doesn't shoot the 3 enough relative to the rest of the league. 1.6 threes per game is not that much for a guard. 3 rebounds is really nothing. 4.4 assists is fine. It's probably not going to go much higher than that. 1.1 steals is okay, but it's not great. The percentages are nice. They are. But the turnovers are pretty high and the blocks are pretty low. Really, the biggest value that Sexton brings to the table is that 24 points on nice percentages, And that's really it. Nothing else is spectacular. A lot of it's just not good. He was outside the top 100 players in 9-cat leagues last year. And look, I like Sexton in real life, and I can totally see him taking more steps forward. But in terms of fantasy in a 9-category league, where is it? What category do you see there that you would anticipate Sexton taking a large enough leap to not only justify taking him within the first 70 picks, but to also assume that you get fantasy value out of him from that range? It's tough. I just don't really know what that looks like. Does he start hitting a lot more threes? It would, if that's the case, his percentages are definitely going to, his field goal percentage is definitely going to go down. I mean, he's a decent real life defender, at least on ball. Maybe the steals go up, have to go up to, maybe 1.3, 1.4. That'd be pretty nice. It's not impossible, but even it's just jumping 40 spots can be tough. And jumping 50 or 60 to get fantasy value at this range is a lot tougher. I don't really see it for Sexton. I think this is kind of a reach. I can say if you really need the points, he's probably a really solid later round option for that. I mean, even at this range, he's scoring more points than most guys on the board, but I don't know. For 9-cat leagues, there's better value to be found. We have a couple more rounds to go through here. Round 7 is next on the docket. And this is a guy who I'm sort of breaking my own rules because Pascal Siakam is injured heading into the year and is guaranteed to miss at least the Raptors' first few opening games, though there's some optimism that he'll be back in early November. But with Siakam, I think that injury mixed with a very inconsistent year last season in Toronto with also just like there's just a narrative out there that he's kind of an overrated player and that, there's been talk about locker room friction with Nick Nurse. I think that on the whole, consensus is a lot lower on Siakam than it was a few years ago. And I think that this is a guy who is still pretty talented and can, especially in a fantasy league, he can do a lot for you from the power forward spot. Like his last 25 games of last season, which were also happened to be the games that, he played post a COVID diagnosis. That's strong top 50 stuff. I mean, I think that he had a much better second half of the year before he got shut down because the Raptors wanted to be bad. But he looked a lot better, at least statistically, towards the end of last year. And even though he's coming into this season hurt, the absence of Kyle Lowry should lead to a larger role for him. It's going to lead to a larger role for Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby as well. But Siakam is still going to be a big part of what these guys are going to be doing, both as a scorer and as a out-of-position facilitator. I think that he could have somewhat of a bounce-back year if that shoulder really heals up. And again, it's always risky to go for a guy who is injured heading into the year. But with an X rank of 77, ADP of 70, and that's been falling, by the way, Yahoo initially had him around the 50s range, and he continues to fall down draft boards. If I have an opportunity to get Pascal Siakam after the first 80 picks, I think that's a pretty solid bet for fantasy value this year. I just can't see him falling any farther than that. I think consensus is a little too low on what he can do. So I like him here. Little bit of a risk, but a risk worth taking at this juncture of the draft. Here's another risk. This is a guy who I've also talked about a good amount on this channel, and this is another big points league influence here. And again, nothing against Kevin Porter Jr. I love the story of him turning his life around in Houston, and I love him stepping into this point guard role for this team. It's going to be really fun to watch him. Is strictly talking about fantasy basketball, the reality is in a 9-category league, and it's cut off there a little at the top, but he has an X rank of 79, ADP of 85.4, and that's really climbing. That 2 weeks ago was in the 100s. So just playing an averages game, people are taking him way earlier than that right now. I mean, like he's really skyrocketing up the board. He might not even be available in some 9-cat leagues by the 7th round, and that's just a mistake because even though he's got some incredible scoring numbers, really high assist numbers, good 3-point numbers, can get you involved with the rebounds as well, kind of a triple-double threat. The percentages are so bad, the defensive stats are non-existent, and the turnovers are as high as anyone in the league because this is a guy who's still learning the position. There's so much volatility there that there's no way you can justify taking him in really at this range in a 9-category leagues. And I could be wrong. Maybe he figures, maybe he's incredibly efficient this year. I kind of doubt that because Houston's going to be bad. And if this, this wing turned point guard's just putting up triple-double, close to triple-double numbers on high efficiency, maybe that says more about how successful you think Houston would be on the season. I don't have a lot of faith in them. It's just, there's so much. There's a lot of points league influence. I'll just end it at that. He's going to be great in those settings. But to me, there's just no way that he justifies this valuation in a 9-category leagues. There's other values on the board that you'd be much better suited going for. The next guy I'm going to talk about, absolutely, in my opinion, is going to be a much better 9-category league player, and he's way more boring than Kevin Porter Jr., but it's the man, Mike Conley. Point guard for the Utah Jazz, currently with an X rank of 86, ADP of 85.5. I think that he is a major steal in the 8th round of fantasy drafts. A lot of people fell off of Conley after his first year in Utah, where he was just really abysmal. And it's these things that we kind of overlook, where a lot of the times when you're a veteran point guard and you are leaving an organization that you've been with for a long time and going to a new setup, it's a really hard position to play with a bunch of brand new teammates. I mean, Conley just looked lost in his first season in Utah. They played a different style of basketball. He didn't know the tendencies of teammates like Mitchell and Gobert the same fashion that he did then. But this last year that he had was really solid. I mean, the man, he was an all-star replacement, but he did make his first all-star team. That was somewhat warranted by his production. It wasn't just a legacy pick, at least not entirely. But top 55 on a per game basis. But here's the kicker: if you're concerned about Lowry is that he's old and he's going to miss time, I do understand that. But his ADP is at 85.5. He was a top 85 player on totals last year. That's including that is factoring in games that he missed. The totality of his production was still a top 85 player. This is can't miss. If you are in like the mid 80s and Mike Conley's on the board, don't even sweat it. Take him. That's a steal in my mind, and there's one that I'm excited to act on should I get to that point. The last guy we're going to talk about in this video, an 8th round bust, and this isn't all that fair because, there's, again, once you get close to this range, busts it's really hard to talk about busts. You're really taking just dart throws at a bunch of different guys. But I do want to talk about Evan Mobley because there's a lot of questions that you should be asking about this specific season that he's about to embark on. X rank at 87, ADP of 88.3. This is really, for me, it's I don't really know how Cleveland is planning to deploy this guy this year. From all these people that I trust who really study draft prospects and have an idea of how they envision Mobley in the NBA, they all say the same thing. This is a guy his natural position is center. He can't be a center this year. Even if Jarrett Allen wasn't there, he isn't strong enough. He doesn't have enough weight to play that position in the NBA at this point. But there's some concerns about how viable he really is as a power forward. Mobley can stretch it. He's got an outside shot, and he is a versatile defender. Those are really the two things you need out of your power forward. But there's some positioning things that it's still a different position on the floor. He's going to have to work a little bit harder to be more of a help defender in this kind of setup. And I don't really know what that looks like in terms of on-court success playing next to Jarrett Allen, but also what it means for his statistical production. Not to mention that they brought in Lauri Markkanen, who's a better fit next to Jarrett Allen just objectively. Even if Mobley is a better player and certainly a better prospect, there's just a lot of questions that I have about how many minutes he can carve out in that crowded front court and just what the fit looks like next to Jarrett Allen. This is a guy who's got a really enticing stat set. Maybe it just doesn't matter, and he still piles up like close to 2.5 to 3 defensive stats a game, get you some threes and boards. And maybe I'm totally off base here, but there's so many questions, and I'm just not sure if this is going to be the year for Mobley. So I'm probably going to lean away from him at this juncture of the draft. So we're going to cut it off there because once we get past the 8th round, that's where in a 12-team league, that's when you get to your top 100 picks. And that's kind of just a different video entirely, where I'm just going to talk about some great targets in that range. But yeah, these are steals and busts that I like. in Yahoo drafts through those first 8 rounds. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think that I was off base on any of these guys on steal or bust capacity? I'd love to hear input, love to hear it out. And if you really enjoyed this video, excited for more like these, drop a like, subscribe to the Hoopball YouTube channel. Please, we would really appreciate having y'all on board. I'm probably going to do another video for points leagues too. So I know I ragged on a lot of points leagues based guys in this video. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to look at the category leagues impact on points leagues in an upcoming video here. So stick around, check that out once we drop it. And yeah, hope this helped you for your upcoming draft. Let us know if it did. And we will talk to y'all next time. Take it easy, everyone.